with parsing, remember, when we're looking at a verb in Greek, we're looking at a verb, we have to find certain elements about that verb. Because when we discover those elements, it makes the translation of that verb way more easier because you see all the little nuances in it. So, remember, we have tense, voice, mood, and then finally you have your person and your number, right? So it's either first, second, or third, singular or plural. So we've kind of established that on this side. So, and this is always, to me, the most important part to remember when you're doing your verbs, right? So tense, okay, let's review this. With tense, we have what we call time of action, but there's also what is called kind of action. Do you remember the fancy schmancy way of talking about kind of action? We called it verbal aspect. Verbal aspect. So the way in which you look at this verb. So in Greek, they asked two questions about a verb. They said, when is it happening and how is it happening? And from what we can understand, probably when something happened was not nearly as important to them as how something happened. Okay? And so, of course, they want to know when, but once they got the when part out, they're like, okay, but how? You know, and in the Greek, the verb itself will give you a lot more of that information. And of course, surrounding context will do that for you. So, with this kind of being something we want to keep our eyes out for, remember we have three different types of aspect. We have the default, which is aoristic aspect. Then you have imperfective aspect. And then you have the perfective aspect. Okay, so remember, this again, this one right here, that is our to be expected everyday aspect. Okay, you have a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pluperfect.
Pluperfect falls in the realm of perfect.
Okay.
Because it's the perfect of past time.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So with aoristic, what we're going to do is we usually indicate that by just putting two parentheses and putting nothing in the middle of it. We're not drawing attention to this verb. So when we see a verb and it's set in the aoristic tense, so like an aorist verb, makes sense? When you look at that verb, you're not supposed to really pay any attention to it. It just helps kind of move the story along. And narratives are filled with that. You know, he walked here, he jumped over here, blah, 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 blah. It's just you're moving the story along, right? But then you get to something, if you come outside of the aoristic tense or aoristic aspect, it's something to take notice of. So the imperfect, or the imperfective aspect, we note that with a line to give you this idea that this verb now is progressive. It keeps going. It's repetitive. It's habitual. Continuous. However you want to think of it like that. Okay? So I don't have my notes in front of me, but with my examples, but and this is the classic example, right? In Matthew, when Jesus is feeding the 5,000, it gives you four verbs back to back. It says that he took the loaves, he blessed the loaves, he broke the loaves, and he gave the loaves, right? Boom, 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 boom. And every single one of those verbs is in this tense. So it's just moving the story along. But you get to Mark, and it's Jesus took the loaves, he blessed the loaves, he broke the loaves, but he what with the loaves? He kept giving it out, right? And so it's like you can see the miracle happening in Jesus' hands. Like he broke the bread, and it just never stopped coming out of his hands. Some ways you can actually translate, or he began to give out the bread. But even that idea there, like, when did it stop? It doesn't tell you, you know? So that's kind of the cool thing with the verbs here. And then you have the perfective aspect, which you're going to note with a dot. So remember, that's the idea that the action took place in the past and was completed, but the results of that action are still felt in the present. So an action that took place in the past and was completed, but the results of it are still felt in the present. And an example of that, again, is like somebody asks me, do you work at Chick-fil-A? And I can say to them, I worked at Chick-fil-A for 4 years. The way I said that would indicate that I used to work there, but I don't anymore. But if somebody says, do you work at Chick-fil-A? And I say, I have worked there for 4 years. That implies that I've completed that 4 years, but I'm still what? I'm still working there. So that's kind of the idea of the perfective aspect.